They told me not to come. The reunion invitation arrived with a cruel note. You'd embarrass the family. For years, I tried to believe their smiles, their fake affection, the staged dinners that looked perfect from the outside. But behind closed doors, I was always the shadow, the reminder of everything they despised. This time, they made sure I stayed away. Or so they thought. Because while they laughed inside the grand hall, the walls themselves were preparing to speak my name. And when my name appeared, glowing above their heads, nothing in that family would ever be the same. I remember the first time I saw my family's house from a distance that night. It glowed like a cathedral, lights spilling across manicured lawns, chandeliers shimmering through wide glass windows. From the outside, it looked like something people would envy. The perfect American family. Cars lined the driveway, each more expensive than the last. The kind of place where the air itself felt rich, perfumed with roses carefully planted along the stone pathway. And yet, standing there, I felt the same ache I always had. I wanted to believe this was home, that somewhere in those walls was warmth for me too. I stepped inside and was immediately met with the spectacle. Laughter echoing down the marble hall, cousins posing for photos near the staircase, my sister Evelyn in her designer dress holding a champagne flute, basking in compliments. She was radiant, the daughter everyone adored. My brother Daniel had people clapping him on the back, telling him how brilliant his latest deal was. Even my parents, Margaret and William, moved through the crowd like royalty, smiling broadly, welcoming guests with open arms. For a moment, I almost believed in the picture they painted. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe, just once, I would belong. But then it started. Evelyn glanced at me with that cool smile that cut deeper than any insult. "Clara, you're here already," she said, as if my presence was unexpected, inconvenient. Daniel leaned over and whispered just loudly enough, "Did you take the bus this time?" People around him chuckled politely, but I felt the sting burn my chest. My mother's eyes slid past me as though I wasn't even there, settling instead on Evelyn's flawless hair. "Darling, you look stunning," she cooed, adjusting a necklace on her eldest. My father gave Daniel a firm pat on the shoulder, murmuring about how proud he was of his achievements. No one asked how I was doing, not a single word. I tried to smile, to slip into the rhythm of the evening, to pretend that the sharp edges didn't exist. I told myself to be patient, to prove to them I was worth noticing. But the truth was written all over their faces. My place here was ornamental at best, a shadow in their golden cage. My stomach tightened as I passed a hallway, and that's when I heard it. My mother's voice, sharp and low, not meant for me but impossible to ignore. "As long as she doesn't come, it will be perfect." The words lodged like ice in my chest. She hadn't seen me. I froze, every nerve screaming. She was speaking to my father, who gave a curt nod. "We can't risk her embarrassing us," he replied. I wanted to collapse right there, but I forced myself forward, past them, into the next room. They didn't even notice. My hands trembled as I gripped the stem of a glass someone had handed me. The laughter around me blurred, voices fading into meaningless noise. Their love was never mine to begin with. The illusion shattered. Later that night, as I sat quietly near the corner of the dining room, I listened as praises rained down on my siblings. "Evelyn, you've always made us proud," one aunt said, squeezing her hand. "Daniel, you'll surpass your father one day," another declared. And then came the glance in my direction, the inevitable sting. "And you, Clara," a relative asked, almost pitying, "when will you finally do something important?" I smiled thinly, murmured something polite. Inside, the words crushed me. It wasn't just a question, it was a verdict. No matter what I did, it would never be enough. When I confronted my father quietly later, he brushed it off. "We only say those things because we want you to be better, Clara. We believe in you, you're just sensitive." The classic dismissal, gaslighting at its finest. They wanted me to doubt myself, to believe I was the problem, and for years I had. That night, as I stood alone near the coat closet, I felt the full weight of the fracture. I could leave, walk away, and finally admit defeat. Or I could stay, keep trying to win approval that would never come. Neither choice felt like freedom. My hands shook as I pulled on my coat, heart pounding in my ears. Then, something unexpected happened. A man in a black suit approached, holding out a plain white envelope. "For you, Miss Mitchell," he said before disappearing into the crowd. My breath caught as I opened it. Inside was a card, thick and cream-colored, embossed with gold. At first glance, it looked like an invitation, but as my eyes reached the handwritten note at the bottom, my blood turned to ice. "Clara, don't come to the reunion. You'll only embarrass us." The words swam before me. My fingers tightened, crumpling the edge of the envelope. My entire body went cold. For a second, I thought I might faint. I looked around the glittering hall, at the smiling faces, the laughter, the so-called family celebrating their perfection. None of them knew I had just been erased. And yet, a flicker of something stirred beneath the pain. A question I couldn't silence. If they wanted me gone so badly, what would happen if I stayed? The days following that night blurred together, but one thing became clear. I was no longer invited into the inner circle. Conversations happened without me. Decisions were made as though I didn't exist. Evelyn and Daniel gathered with my parents around the oak table in the study, doors closed, voices rising in laughter or serious tones. Whenever I approached, silence fell, and papers were shuffled quickly out of sight. "Family matters," my father would say firmly, his eyes warning me not to ask questions. I was their daughter, their blood, but I felt like an intruder in my own home. The estate lawyer came by once, his leather briefcase gleaming. I stood in the hallway, listening as words like inheritance and trust funds floated through the closed door. I had no seat at the table. Later, I asked Evelyn what it was about. She didn't even try to soften the blow. "It doesn't concern you, Clara." Why would it? Her smile was bright, cruel in its perfection, as though the exclusion was natural, deserved. The longer it went on, the clearer it became. I was not part of this family's future. I was a relic they tolerated in passing, the ghost in their photographs. A chair always left empty at the table, a name never mentioned in serious matters. One evening, I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at the faded wallpaper. My mind drifted to childhood. I remembered sitting on my father's shoulders, the way he would march around the yard while I squealed with laughter. I remembered my mother's warm hands braiding my hair before school. For a moment, my chest ached with the memory of belonging. Where had that family gone? Were they ever real, or had I invented them in order to survive? That night was a rare pause, a breath in the storm where grief gave way to tenderness. But it was short-lived. My phone buzzed on the table. I reached for it with shaking hands. A message lit the screen, sharp as a blade. "Don't go. If you show up, we'll all be ashamed of you." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. My breath hitched, chest tightening. It wasn't just exclusion now. It was exile. They didn't simply want me gone. They wanted me erased. The following week, their disdain turned public. At a dinner, when a guest mentioned the growing tension between siblings, my brother Daniel laughed, raising his glass. "Clara's always been the problem. She thrives on drama." He said it lightly, as if joking, but the smirk told me he meant every word. The table erupted in nervous chuckles. I froze, heat flooding my cheeks. I looked at my parents, desperate for them to defend me. My father only sipped his wine, eyes fixed elsewhere. My mother adjusted her napkin, silent. Evelyn leaned closer, her voice low but laced with venom. "You really should stop making everything about you. It's exhausting." Sure, her hand grazed mine briefly, almost affectionate, but her eyes glimmered with triumph. It was a gesture for others to see, one that said, "We're close," while her words carved me open. From that night forward, it became routine. Any argument, any financial setback, any disagreement in the family, my name was whispered as the cause. If Clara hadn't, if Clara didn't, I became the scapegoat for everything they refused to face in themselves. Their wealth, their reputation, their carefully crafted facade needed someone to absorb the cracks. And I was that someone. One night, after another bitter dinner, I found myself outside under the cold sky. My breath fogged in the air as I tried to steady myself. I watched Evelyn through the glass window, laughing effortlessly, her hand on our mother's shoulder. For a moment, her eyes flicked to me. Our gazes locked. She smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, one that told me she knew exactly what she was doing. My stomach twisted. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't oversight. It was betrayal, conscious and deliberate. I pressed my palm to the cold stone of the wall, whispering into the night. If they push me out. My voice shook, but then steadied. I'll find a way to walk back in through the front door. The message came late at night, just as the city was settling into its uneasy silence. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the glow cutting through the dark. I reached for it half asleep, expecting nothing more than a reminder or some empty notification. But when I opened it, my heart froze. The words stared back at me, cruel and final. Clara, don't come to the reunion. You'll only embarrass us. I read it again and again, each repetition carving deeper into my chest. It wasn't just a suggestion or a plea. It was a banishment. The reunion, the one event that was supposed to symbolize family unity, had no place for me. My hands shook, my breath caught in ragged gasps. I curled on the edge of my bed, the neon light from the liquor store across the street flickering through the blinds. It painted my walls with sickly colors, flashing reminders that I was outside, excluded, unwanted. Tears spilled hot and fast. My body shook with sobs I couldn't control. I pressed my forehead to my knees, rocking slightly as though the motion could hold me together. My mind clung to one image, a photograph tucked in the drawer beside me. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. In it, a younger version of me was laughing in my mother's arms. Her smile was wide, genuine, eyes filled with love. I stared at it until the edges blurred with tears. Where was that woman? Had she ever really existed? Or had I conjured her in desperation, building illusions of love from scraps of memory? For a moment, I let myself ache for her, the mother who braided my hair, who whispered lullabies at night. But the silence of the room gave me the answer. She was gone, and in her place stood a stranger who no longer claimed me. The anger surged as quickly as the sorrow. My hand clenched, and before I could stop myself, I hurled the photograph across the room. The frame shattered against the wall, glass scattering across the floor. My chest heaved, my throat raw from sobbing. That was when my laptop screen blinked alive with a new email notification. My breath caught. Wiping my eyes, I stumbled across the room, glass crunching beneath my feet. The subject line read, "Property Acquisition Confirmation." Confused, I clicked it open. It was from a large real estate firm thanking me for my recent investment. The words blurred as I skimmed, but the address leapt out. The very building where my family planned to host the reunion. My pulse pounded. I didn't fully understand yet, but something inside me stirred. The story wasn't finished. But the days that followed dragged me back down. The rejection consumed me. I stopped eating, pushing untouched plates away. Nights stretched endlessly as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling until dawn painted pale lines across the room. My body weakened, my reflection in the mirror becoming gaunt, haunted. I replayed every memory, every cruel word, every laugh at my expense until it became unbearable noise. There were moments I thought about ending it all, just vanishing from a world that clearly had no space for me. One afternoon, I sat slumped against my apartment wall, the shadows long and heavy. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly ignored it, but something compelled me to look. It wasn't another cruel message. It was a drawing, slipped under my door by the little boy who lived down the hall. Crayon lines sketched clumsy figures, a tall woman with long hair and a red cape, standing like a protector. Above it, in crooked letters, were the words, Clara is my hero. The paper trembled in my hands. My vision blurred, but not from despair this time. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than hollow emptiness. This small, innocent gesture pulled me back from the edge. Someone saw me. Someone believed in me. I pressed the drawing to my chest, tears falling quietly now. Not all love was conditional. Not all families were cages. The thought steadied me, even as the ache lingered. That night, as I sat staring out my window at the neon glow, a decision began to take shape. My family had written me off, erased me, banished me. But erasure is never complete unless you allow it. If they wanted me gone so badly, then I would carve my presence into the world in a way they could never ignore. I whispered into the night, steady and unyielding, if they want to erase me, I'll write my name in light. The days after the breakdown were different. For the first time, I stopped asking what was wrong with me and began asking what was wrong with them. I started reading obsessively. Articles, journals, survivor stories about toxic families. Words like scapegoating, gaslighting, and narcissistic control leapt off the pages, each one striking a chord so deep I could barely breathe. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't oversensitive. I wasn't the problem. The patterns were textbook, the cruelty systemic. The relief came in waves, so sharp it was almost painful. After years of thinking I was broken, I realized I had simply been living in a broken family. Armed with this knowledge, I sought out others who had walked the same path. I found online support groups, people whose stories mirrored mine in uncanny ways. Late at night, we exchanged messages, strangers, yet closer to me than my own blood. "You're not alone," one woman wrote. "They made you a scapegoat to protect themselves. That says everything about them and nothing about you." Those words, simple as they were, became a lifeline. I reached out to a mentor I once admired at work, a woman who had risen through impossible odds. We met for coffee in a quiet cafe. She listened as I haltingly described the years of exclusion, the note that told me not to come. Her eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "Clara, you have to understand. They don't get to define you. They never did. The moment you stop begging for their approval is the moment you win." For the first time, I lifted my head and looked straight into someone's eyes without shame. A fire flickered there, faint but undeniable. Walking back home that evening, I caught my reflection in a store window. My eyes were different, not hollow anymore, not afraid, alive. Back in my apartment, I sat before my laptop. Fingers hovering over the keys, I let the clarity settle. If they wanted me gone, fine. But I wasn't gone. I was still here, breathing, fighting, and stronger than before. I opened an internal portal I had access to through work. The company database flickered on screen, lines of data scrolling by. I typed in the address of the building hosting the reunion. My heart thudded as the search processed, then froze when the result appeared. The owner's name filled the screen. I leaned back, lips curving into the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. The name was mine. The realization didn't just give me power. It gave me purpose. I began tracing back the threads of their cruelty, the words they had used to diminish me. I compiled messages, voicemails, little slips of disdain preserved in emails. Not for revenge in the traditional sense, but as evidence. Proof that their treatment wasn't just in my head, that their abuse had shape and weight. Meanwhile, I reviewed my own finances. I had been working quietly, steadily, climbing my way through my career while they sneered at me. And now, while they toasted themselves with champagne, I was sitting on the other side of the table they never thought I could reach. Through persistence, I had become a leader in the very company that owned their precious venue. The irony was so sharp it nearly made me laugh, but I kept that laughter inside, saving it for later. I drafted a plan, each step deliberate. I would not storm the reunion. I would not shout or demand recognition. That would make me exactly what they claimed I was: desperate, unstable, embarrassing. Instead, I would let the truth do the work for me. The building itself would speak louder than I ever could. Every detail mattered. The lighting system in the lobby, the digital wall display, the guest list. I arranged access silently, ensuring my name would appear at the right moment. I wanted no confrontation, no spectacle of anger. Only revelation, only truth. Nights stretched long as I perfected each element, but instead of insomnia draining me, it now fueled me. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was crafting something unstoppable. When exhaustion came, I let myself pause. Sometimes I would sit at my window, holding the crayon drawing from the boy down the hall. Clara is my hero. The words steadied me. I wasn't just surviving for myself anymore. I was proving something larger, that no one has the right to erase another person's worth. Finally, on the eve of the reunion, I stared at my laptop one last time. The system confirmed my final adjustments. The words glowed on the screen, sealing the plan I had set in motion. Property owner, Clara Mitchell. I whispered it aloud, savoring each syllable. They had tried to silence me. Tomorrow, the walls of their golden hall would speak in my name. The Mitchell family reunion unfolded exactly as they had dreamed it would, at least in the beginning. The grand lobby of the high-rise gleamed under the golden chandeliers, marble floors polished to a mirror's shine. Guests in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos clinked glasses of champagne, their laughter rising above the strains of a live string quartet. Evelyn glided across the room like a queen, her hand brushing the shoulder of nearly everyone she passed. Daniel shook hands with business associates, recounting stories of his recent triumphs. My parents stood near the center, radiant with pride, greeting guests as though they were hosting royalty. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume, a performance of wealth and unity. Cameras flashed as relatives posed against the sculpted staircase. To the outsiders, it looked like perfection, the family every other family aspired to be. My absence wasn't questioned, not yet. For them, it was expected. But I was there, in a different way. I had never intended to stand among them, not anymore. My presence was woven into the very walls, into the circuits humming behind the polished surfaces. As the minutes ticked by, my plan waited silently, like a held breath. 10 minutes into the event, just as the speeches were about to begin, the lobby dimmed slightly. Conversations faltered. Heads turned toward the massive LED display mounted above the main entrance. At first, it flickered, subtle, almost unnoticeable. Then, in blazing white letters, 2 words appeared. "Welcome, Clara Mitchell." The room went silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by stunned whispers. Faces turned, searching, as if I might step through the doorway at any moment. My family froze where they stood, expressions shifting from confusion to horror. My mother's glass trembled in her hand. My father's jaw tightened, his face pale beneath the warm light. Daniel muttered something under his breath, eyes darting nervously to the crowd. Evelyn, always the composed one, tried to maintain her poise, but her lips parted slightly, a crack in her flawless facade. She leaned toward my father, her voice a sharp hiss I wasn't meant to hear, but imagined all the same. "This can't be. The building belongs to her?" The words hung heavy, even if spoken only in a whisper. Guests stared openly now, their perfect image of the Mitchells unraveling before their eyes. My parents tried to recover. My father raised his voice, forcing a chuckle. "A small technical error, nothing more." He motioned to the event staff, who scurried in panic, fumbling at control panels. But the name remained, steady and unshakable. The music had stopped. The chatter was gone. All that existed was my name, glowing above their heads like truth carved in stone. Daniel's face twisted in anger. "She did this," he snapped, though no one dared respond. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, but not in comfort. Her eyes betrayed fear, calculation. She knew this was no accident. The guests, once so eager to bask in our family's perfection, shifted uncomfortably. Whispers carried across the marble hall. "Did you know Clara owns the building? Why would they exclude her? What kind of family does this?" The Mitchell image, so carefully cultivated for decades, fractured in real time. My parents smiled stiffly, insisting everything was fine, urging the musicians to continue. But the illusion was gone. You can't unsee a mask once it slips. I watched from a distance, unseen, feeling no need to step into the chaos. My silence was louder than any speech I could have given. They had told me not to come. Yet here I was, without even being present. The unraveling was swift. My mother hissed at the staff, demanding answers. My father tried to laugh it off, but his eyes darted wildly, betraying panic. Daniel barked orders, but no one listened. Evelyn's smile returned, brittle now, stretched thin like glass, ready to crack. Guests excused themselves quietly, drifting toward the exits with polite but curious expressions. A few lingered, enjoying the spectacle of a dynasty collapsing. One older man, a friend of the family for years, shook his head and whispered to the woman beside him. I couldn't hear his words directly, but I saw his lips form them. She doesn't need to be here. Her name says it all. The truth had spoken, louder than I ever could, and as I watched my family scramble beneath the glowing letters of my name, I felt no need for vengeance, no hunger for confrontation. Justice wasn't in my rage. It was in their collapse. The weeks that followed the reunion were strangely quiet. For once, there were no whispers about me, no taunts, no accusations hurled in my direction. It wasn't because they had changed. It was because their world had collapsed without me to absorb the blows. The Mitchell family, once so unshakable, began to fracture from within. Without a scapegoat, my siblings turned on one another. Daniel accused Evelyn of orchestrating the failure. Evelyn blamed Daniel for drawing attention with his arrogance. My parents tried desperately to hold the family together, but the carefully polished image had been shattered too publicly. Whispers spread through their social circles. Invitations dwindled. The house that had once been a stage for their perfection grew darker, emptier. I heard about it through others, never directly. Some relatives reached out, tentative and ashamed. "Clara, we didn't know," one cousin wrote. "If we had, we would have stood with you." Their words were too little, too late, but they confirmed what I already understood. The truth was undeniable now. My family had destroyed themselves, and they had no one left to blame. For the first time, I felt no need to defend myself. I didn't have to explain, argue, or prove my worth. The name on the wall had done that for me. Justice had arrived quietly, not in a storm of rage, but in the silence that followed. I was free, not because they finally accepted me, but because I no longer needed them to. One evening, I stepped out onto the balcony of my apartment. The city stretched out before me, alive with light and motion. Cars streamed like rivers of fire, skyscrapers pulsed with electric life. Neon signs buzzed with color. For years, I had felt like an outsider, locked out of my own family's glow. Now I realized the city was mine too. The world was wide, full of light, and I was no longer in the shadows. My breath came easier, deeper. Freedom wasn't something they could give me. It was something I had claimed for myself. But freedom didn't mean solitude. Slowly, I began to build something new. I sought out the people who had supported me when no one else did, the mentor who reminded me of my worth, the online friends who shared their own scars, the neighbor who always greeted me with kindness. Piece by piece, I wove them into a tapestry of chosen family, people bound not by blood, but by love and respect. The little boy down the hall was one of the first to visit. He came running up one afternoon, clutching another drawing in his small hands. This time it was more colorful, more confident. A woman standing on a mountain, surrounded by stars. "It's you again," he said proudly, his grin wide. I crouched down, tears stinging my eyes as I pulled him into a hug. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You don't know how much this means to me." In that moment, the weight of everything I had lost seemed lighter. Maybe I would never have the family I was born into, but I had something else now, something better, a chosen family built on truth, not appearances, on love, not conditions. I began volunteering at a support group for people estranged from their families. At first, I only listened, but soon I found myself sharing my story. Not every detail, not every wound, but enough to let them know they weren't alone. I saw in their eyes the same haunted doubt I had once carried, and I offered them the words that had saved me. "It's not you. It was never you. Every time someone cried in relief, every time a burden lifted from a stranger's shoulders, I felt myself healing too. My pain had become something else. Purpose. One night, sitting alone in my apartment, I held the boy's first drawing in one hand and the second in the other. "Clara is my hero," the crooked letters declared. I pressed them against my chest, tears slipping down my cheeks, but this time they weren't bitter. They were soft, cleansing. I wasn't a cold warrior, defined only by survival. I was more. I was human, fragile and strong, broken and rebuilt. I wasn't defined by rejection anymore, but by the love I gave and received outside the walls of the Mitchell home. Looking out at the city lights once more, I whispered to myself, "This is freedom." Not the silence of exile, but the fullness of a life reclaimed. And in that moment, I knew. My story was no longer about being erased. It was about being seen.